everybody forget the last 3 minutes that you saw. We are off to a terrible start. It's all Austin's fault today. He was late getting here, and nothing was hooked up. Nothing was ready to go. Unfortunately, we got accused on Twitter of having all kinds of money to spend on the setup and everything, but they don't realize how much stuff that we borrow. And so we're like constantly moving equipment around because we can't afford stuff in two places. And so when Austin's late, everything gets all messed up.
And see, Austin late is a really funny statement. Because Austin late means that Austin didn't come 40 minutes early.
That's right.
To set the whole room up and steal everything back from the place that it was stolen.
If you don't
from.
show up 10 minutes early, you're in the McMurtry family, you're late.
That's right.
Exactly.
At least 10 minutes.
I was 10 minutes early today.
And
exactly. What broadcast morning have we had yet where there wasn't some kind of issue? You know that something's going to be off.
Yeah,
So
I think last
you're
week we didn't have any
Last
issues.
week we didn't have any issues.
I think that was the first week.
I got a little bit too comfortable. I didn't come 40 minutes early.
Yeah, well, and
lo and behold, we have this start to the podcast.
And I tried setting it all up before myself, but there was like stuff missing that Austin moved. So that's another reason we're blaming him. But you got to blame somebody.
Yep.
And so it's Austin that takes the blame. So we apologize for all of our technical difficulties. We are not professionals. We just do this for fun and hope other people enjoy it. But anyway, so back to the original program, because we were talking for a little bit and had no idea. Nobody could hear anything we were saying. But it is February 7th, and it is super cold outside. It is really cold out there today. So be careful out there traveling, and be safe, dress warm. It is nice and warm in this room, though. This room always gets really hot, and I'm actually enjoying that right now because the auditorium is not super warm today. But that's all right. We will be okay. And I got bad news, too. I got a text. The power is going to be out at our house from 9:30 to 1:30. So today, yes.
Coldest day of the year.
Yeah, I won't be there. Nobody will be there, but I just hope nothing freezes.
Did they say why?
They're going to be working on something. So, yeah. Negative 15 degrees out there.
Hope there's no inconvenience. It's literally a freezer outside.
Yeah.
You're not going to have any power to heat your house for a long... Man, that's garbage.
Yeah, it's going to be bad.
They should refund you all your utilities for the month just for that.
I agree. So, and hopefully I don't have any pipes burst or anything like that. But, yeah, so we'll see what happens there. Hopefully they'll get it done quick. But anyway, we want to get to the subject of the program today. Today, the title is I Will Walk at Liberty. That comes from a passage in Psalms 119. And this was a passage that I had preached some sermons on back when I was getting ready to start the church, before we started the church. And I had decided, it was actually about 10 years ago, right around this time, that we decided that we wanted to come and start a church in Rock Falls. And I had decided maybe 6 months to a year before that, if I ever started a church, I was going to name it Liberty Baptist Church. And I didn't know that might get me associated with Liberty University, because I get asked that a lot. I've never been involved with Liberty University in any way, shape, or form. Zero connection to Liberty University. And I'm very thankful for that zero connection to Liberty University. I'm not impressed with the place. But I wanted to name the church Liberty because I felt like my life was a great example in the way I had been raised. The type of church I had been raised in was one that showed what real Christian liberty is. And it was around that time, too, when I started getting introduced to a lot of what I call the trendies today and people that were talking a lot about legalism. And I was looking at, the direction they were going compared to where they came from, which is where I was from. And I was thinking, and I would hear these people talk about liberty all the time as though their new license to sin that they had discovered they had through the scriptures equaled liberty. And I remember thinking, the way I live is what shows liberty. I was born free, and I've lived a free life because of the fact that I was blessed, and I'm not bragging, I was just blessed to be born in a home where I was raised and taught Christian principles, and where they had rules and things that follow the Word of God. And so the passage where I got the title today is in Psalms 119, verse 45, says, I will walk at liberty, for I seek thy precepts. Now, most people, when you talk about liberty, all of a sudden laws, they see that as, an obstacle to liberty, which is absolutely ridiculous. So let's go ahead and read more of this passage. But in Psalm 119, verse 41, it says, let mercies come also unto me, O Lord, even thy salvation according to thy word. So shall I have wherewith to answer him that reproacheth me, for I trust in thy word, and take not the word of truth utterly out of my mouth, for I have hoped in thy judgments. So shall I keep thy law continually forever and ever, and I will walk at liberty, for I seek thy precepts. Psalms 119, the psalmist writing this, you can tell, loves the law of God. I mean, it's all about the law, precepts, statutes, judgments. I think there's only like 2 or 3 verses where there's not some reference to the words and the law of God. And he's saying, I'm going to walk in these things. I'm going to follow these things. He said, I'm going to walk at liberty, for I seek thy precepts. He wasn't looking for a way to rightly divide these things out of his life. Mm-hmm. He didn't see these things as bondage. He saw these things and he loved them. He said, I will speak of thy testimonies also before kings and will not be ashamed. And I will delight myself in thy commandments, which I have loved. That reminds me of how his commandments are not grievous. Mm-hmm. My hands also will I lift up unto thy commandments, which I have loved, and I will meditate in thy statutes. Now, this is a completely different attitude from what we see today from so-called New Testament Christians that are all about grace, who look at the Old Testament law of God and they are embarrassed by it.
Yeah.
They see all the death penalty stuff in there, and they get embarrassed by it. And then what do? Their response is to basically gay up the grace of God and start just talking about how, wonderful and loving God is. And then anybody who looks at these laws as a good thing, they see them as bad. And then what they do is the straw man arguments come, and the accusations come at those of us who love the law of God. And we look to this and we think, you know what, I'm going to apply this to my life because I think this is good stuff. Mm-hmm. I still think the law of the Lord is good. And, we don't have time to go down all the rabbit trails, but I'm going to say a lot of things today that I know will be taken and twisted and used the wrong way. All right. Now, how many of these people will have the guts to actually talk to me and get clarification if for some reason they actually are confused? All right. That probably won't happen from these people. But at the same time, I'm telling you right now, I believe that the way to experience real liberty is through following the laws of God. Mm-hmm. Because of the fact that these laws, they help us avoid so many things that bring bondage in our life. And we're going to go to Galatians here in a little bit. Okay? But think about this, all right? Because I was taught things like, no sex outside of marriage. Because I was taught things like that. You know what? I've never had to worry about baby mamas. Yeah. I was taught, find that one woman, marry her, stay married for life. You know what? I don't have to worry about paying child support. I never have to worry about some woman coming along someday and saying, you know what? I'm carrying your baby. You got to pay me money. I don't have to worry about that because I've stayed married to the same woman for the last 20 years, and all our kids we had together. I don't have to get anyone. I know people, they can't move to another state if they'd like to because they have custody issues. They don't have the same freedom that I do. Now, when they were younger, they had a lot more freedom to do what they wanted with their girlfriends than I did. But yet, who's got more liberty today? I do. I was taught you shouldn't drink. That sounds like a law. Some would say that's captivity. Some would say that's legalism. But I don't struggle with alcoholism today.
Right, and all the other problems that come along with alcoholism.
Right.
The idea that I hate it when I hear people talk about how alcohol is not that big of a deal and everyone should just be allowed to do it and let it happen. It's like, you guys don't understand how damaging this is if you're really advocating for that stuff. Mm-hmm. And when you look at all of just the death and the horrible things that come from alcohol, the the drunk driving. I mean, everything. How many people have died? I mean, how many people personally know someone that's died from a drunk driving accident that wasn't their fault? I mean, because I can name multiple people right now, or people that have just ruined their lives from a decision that they made based off of alcohol. I mean, it's terrible, and everything.
And how many people do you know too that would like to quit smoking, that like to quit drinking, but they feel like they can't?
Yeah, well, think about the financial aspect of it too. How much money you're just burning every month, paying for cigarettes, paying for alcohol. I mean, and these same people need the government to take care of them because they don't have enough money to support themselves.
Right.
It's garbage.
Yeah, and you know what? Shut up about the McDonald's and the fast food and how that's bad for you too. You know what? Nobody else has ever hurt somebody else from eating too much McDonald's.
No. Listen, there was a time, like a year ago, that someone was stabbed to death over those Popeyes chicken sandwiches waiting in line. That happened.
That's just stupid. Those Popeyes is not very good.
No,
It's not, but it happened.
Okay, so we got one example. we got one example. But yeah, I hate when these like clowns they come along, and they're always so skinny they look like they got AIDS too. And then they start talking about all the fat people in the IFB that don't drink, but they eat all this stuff. I get that. Yeah, we don't want to damage ourselves that way either. We don't want to be gluttonous and all that. But I'm not putting other people in danger when I eat a bunch of junk food.
When's the last time spicy McNuggets made you utter perverse thoughts or words? When's the last time that Big Mac kept you in bondage by thinking, I need another one. I got to go back right now.
Yeah.
Every half hour, 15 minutes.
Right. And when do those spicy nuggets make your eyes behold strange women and your heart utter perverse things? So, there's no comparison there, but that's the kind of stuff that they try to do. But and the thing is too, and this is one of the common objections, okay? Yeah, I don't have baby mamas out there. I don't have all this baggage, okay? And then what people do, you deny grace. You're saying that God can't give grace to people that have that baggage. No, that's a wonderful thing about the gospel. God can forgive people that have that baggage. God can give them victory in their life, but that's assuming too that they forsake that lifestyle. You continue, living that way, you're going to continue having problems with it. But God has given many people victorious lives who have been divorced and have had a very difficult past. But at the same time, isn't it better if you don't need to be given, grace in that situation? Isn't it better if you don't have to overcome that hurdle? Because the way I was raised in a way where it was a part of the design for me to not have to deal with certain things. My parents did not want me to have to deal with going to jail. And God can use people that have been in jail, and God always does. But isn't it better if you just never went there? Yeah. God uses divorced people. God uses people that, have a bunch of kids out of wedlock and all, have done drugs and have been drunks. God, thank God for grace. God can still use you if you've messed up in that area. But it's better for you to just never have to deal with those things. Right. And my parents didn't want me dealing with those things. I don't want my kids dealing with those things. So what we do is we look at the law of God, and we don't look at it as like, man, if I don't do all these laws, I'm not going to heaven. Yeah. No, we're looking at these laws, and like the psalmist, we're saying, you know what, if I follow these laws, I'm going to walk at liberty. I'm not going to have problems in this area. Yeah. If I'm not out there ripping people off, I don't have people out there looking for me.
Yeah, it's just better.
Yeah, it's a better life.
I think that's the thing that a lot of these people can't comprehend is we're not, I don't know. I think there's a lot of stuff that they do that's just garbage, that there's no argument. But there's some stuff they do that is just kind of like, if that's just what you prefer to do, then fine, do it. But the point is, the things that we do and the things that we teach have been tried, they're tested, and they work. And they're better than what you're doing.
Yeah, it's better getting married to someone and staying married than trading wives, every 5 or 6 years or something. That creates a lot of problems. Yeah. I mean, it's amazing how stressful the holidays are for some people because they just got to figure out, kid arrangements and all that because, you've got, like I said, the custody situations, the battles. And he said, and if you're dealing with those things, folks, God can help you with those. God can give you grace. But I would think you would be the first ones to step up and say, hey, I would recommend you avoid this.
Right.
I would recommend you not do some of these things that we did. And I'm thankful that, I don't have a criminal record. You realize you have a criminal record, God can still use you, but you know what? That job that you applied for, they might not want to use you if you have that criminal record. You might not be qualified. You might not be able to work in that prison or work in law enforcement, or there's a lot of jobs that you won't be able to have because you did some of those things in the past, where that person who had all those rules in their life and they didn't do those things, they have more opportunity. They're free to do whatever they want, where some people just can't. And I've known some truly wonderful people that God saved out of a very rough life and a rough background, and they have been very limited in their opportunities because they had so much baggage from that old life. I had a friend that wanted to go, who had gotten saved, had a record and everything, wanted to get involved in our detention home ministry at the church, but he wasn't able to for several years because of the fact that he had to wait for certain things to fall off of his record before he could start doing that. And eventually he did, but you know what? There were years that he missed because, he used to do something I wasn't allowed to do, smoke pot. That was one of the things he got in trouble for. It was pot. I wasn't allowed to do that.
Your parents were so
My parents were so legalistic. Wouldn't let me smoke pot.
What terrible.
Yeah.
Oh,
But when I wanted to go start working in the detention home at 21, as soon as I was old enough, I got in just like that.
Yeah.
Where this other guy who was he was in his mid 20s, I think, when he tried getting in there, he couldn't because he had gotten in trouble with that before. And God still used him. God still gave him an opportunity. But so the thing is, this is what drives me crazy with the fake liberty people is, so they'll talk, they'll hear us saying all of these things and talking about these rules and how they're good and how they help us and they make our life better. And then they act like we're making it about salvation, and we're not. And then they'll go to Galatians 5. So let's go to Galatians 5 and let's look at some more scripture, because this is typically the go-to where they like to cherry pick verses. And it says in Galatians 5:1, stand fast therefore in the liberty wherewith Christ has made us free, and be not entangled again with the yoke of bondage. Okay? So I totally get this, because we've been seeing in Galatians how you had those who came in saying that you must be circumcised in order to be saved. Okay? They were clearly adding works to salvation, real legalism. Okay? Not trendy legalism that they talk about. Real legalism is being talked about, and they're telling them not to get caught up in that. You've been called unto liberty. So then it says, behold, I, Paul, say unto you, that if you be circumcised, Christ shall profit you nothing. For I testify again to every man that is circumcised, that he is a debtor to the whole law. So when it comes to the law, if you're using the law for salvation, it's a package deal. You got to do the whole thing. You don't just get to pick one. You don't just get to pick circumcision and Passover and the famous things I like to cherry pick. If you choose any of them, you're obligated to do all of them. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that's something they don't understand too. These people that that Christians that are getting involved in like Passover and stuff. Yeah. The feasts are also a package deal. You do not just keep one feast. Yeah. You do all of the feasts. We're not going to go into that, but anybody who thinks that they, as a Christian, observe the Passover because they go and they do these modern day Seder dinners, they are a hypocrite.
Yeah, that stuff is bizarre.
And ignorant of the scriptures. You are ignorant on so many levels. That's a story for another day. But anyway, same thing with the law. If you're trying to use the law to get to heaven, you got to do the whole thing. So it says, Christ has become of no effect unto you, whosoever of you are justified by the law. You're fallen from grace. You are not saved. Christ, he didn't come and do some of the law so you could get saved by doing some of the law too. Mm-hmm. God works with you if you work with him, right? No, he came and he did all of it. And your faith needs to be completely on him for salvation. And then it says, for we through the Spirit wait for the hope of righteousness by him. For in Jesus Christ neither circumcision availeth anything, nor uncircumcision, but faith, which worketh by love. And so, we're not going to go through this whole thing. I don't want to bore these people with going through too much scripture. But notice in verse 11, so it says, "And I, brethren, if I yet preach circumcision, why do I yet suffer persecution? Then is the offense of the cross ceased. I would that they were even cut off, which trouble you." Those who were teaching that they had to keep the law in order to be saved were troubling them. We remember, especially those Gentiles they talk about in Acts, when they were told, you got to go be circumcised. And these grown men are all freaking out thinking, we don't want to do that.
Right.
And they were greatly comforted when they found out they didn't have to do that. They were very thankful for that. And Paul said, I wish those people would cut off that were troubling you. These people are teaching a false gospel. They're leading you astray. These are bad people. And he says, "For brethren, ye have been called unto liberty, only use not liberty for an occasion to the flesh, but by love serve one another. For all the law is fulfilled in one word, even this, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself." So flat out it tells us, don't use liberty for an occasion to the flesh. That's not why we have it. Thank God, for the fact that if we do mess up, there's grace. Where sin abounds, grace doth much more abound. You're not going to lose your salvation, but to encourage Christians to take advantage of that liberty and to use it for an occasion of the flesh is absolutely insane. And it goes on here and it names off the works of the flesh.
Yeah.
These are the works, the works of the flesh are manifest, which are these, and it goes and it names those things. And then in chapter 6, it goes on to say, "Brethren, if a man be overtaken in a fault." In other words, there's something we can still do wrong, even to save people. "Ye which are spiritual, restore such a one in the spirit of meekness, considering thyself, lest thou also be tempted. Bear ye one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ." So we need to help people with these things, because this, even if you're saved, if you are living in sin, if you are going against God, you are going to have a unnecessary burden to carry. And if somebody's repentant, thank God for a church where people will come together and we will help you. We will encourage you to get through these things. We will help you bear those burdens. But you know what? We're going to teach you to forsake sin. We're going to teach you to deny the things of the flesh and to crucify the flesh. And so today, as New Testament Christians, when I look at the law, I'm not looking at these laws in the Old Testament or just even things that we see in the New Testament, and I'm never looking at these things and saying, all right, which ones of these do I have to do to go to heaven? And you know what? As a pastor, I'm not looking at these things and saying, you know what? Which one of these things can I beat my church members over the head with?
Right.
I'm not out there just looking to just rain on everybody's parade and ruin everybody's fun.
Yeah.
But I am about warning people about the deceitfulness of sin.
Yeah.
Encouraging people to deny the lust of the flesh. And so, and when we look at these laws of God, we realize they're not just there to make us jump through hoops and do all these things to get into the kingdom of God. They're actually there to make our lives better.
Yeah, well, I'd be interested to see the pastor out there that does want to beat his congregation over the head and does want to make his congregation feel bad or anything like that. Because, personally, I don't think that pastor really exists. I think it's a big straw man out there that pastors just have a desire to rule over their people and make them miserable and everything. I mean, sure, you could have one bad guy. That doesn't represent the majority in any way, shape, or form, though.
No, absolutely not. And the thing about that too, where they get the idea that preachers are beating their people over the heads with it and things like that. What that comes from is, one, they get that idea from preaching clips that they see. But you guys know this, that a lot of, for example, even with me, okay, I have some of my own stuff that I do, maybe antics or whatever, but everybody here knows me and they get it, and there's other preachers that they kind of preach with this really harsh persona, and they a lot of the stuff that they do is to get attention, and their congregation knows it and they love it. But then you have these outsiders that see these little clips and they're like, oh, what a dictator, what a maniac. And no, actually, those people in that church, they love that pastor like crazy, and that pastor loves his people like crazy too. And that's just kind of his way of warning. Nobody tells, that grandma or that mom that's out there that tells her child, if you don't watch it, if you don't stop doing that, I'm going to knock you into next Tuesday. Nobody thinks they hate them for that. That's just their way, and the child, they hear that and they get a scared look on their face, and then they don't do what their mom or grandma said to do. But nobody in that situation thinks they don't love them. That's just part of the snowflake generation.
Yeah, well, it's really funny too because, even along with that stuff, a pastor getting up and just really going hard, I mean, to me, that just shows that he actually cares about the congregation, because the easy thing to do and the default to do to keep your congregation around and make sure that everybody likes you and everybody loves you is just tell them exactly what they want to hear, be their friend, be their buddy, never actually go after anything that they need to hear that will make them live a better life and that's ultimately better for them. The pastor, when he's going after specific sins and he's ripping on, maybe something that you and the congregation are guilty of, he has everything to lose by doing that. Because then you get up and you leave, and then he's just left preaching to empty chairs. I mean, the easy thing to do is just to be your buddy and act cool and act like your friend and just let everything else go. I mean, there's a time and a place that sometimes you do just need to hear it, and you need to get knocked in the next Tuesday or something. I mean, that's not overbearing or over controlling. It's necessary.
And I've always loved that kind of preaching.
Yeah.
When I was a teenager, my favorite preacher was the one who had the most creative threats against me. If I if I didn't listen, and I think probably one other area too, and this is the side of the story that you don't hear. Okay, is a lot of the pastors that you hear the stories about how they are overbearing and stuff. A lot of times you do have that person that comes in the church that just wants to question everything, make a big stink about everything. And they stir up a lot of trouble in the church, especially if it's a church too where, they had a lot of rules. They had the Bible college churches. They get a lot of the grief because there's a lot of rules in the Bible college churches. And again, a lot of the problems that they have there is because the modern Bible college model is just not, there's a lot of problems with it. And so there's a lot of side effects. But one of the battles that they have in these modern Bible colleges is, and the reason they're so strict is because pastors, they send their kids to these colleges, and in their church they teach people, don't do this, don't do that, all these things. And so they expect the college to back all those things up. But the truth is, if your child that you're sending off to Bible college is actually an adult now, and they still have to be told and forced not to do this, and this, you obviously didn't do a good job teaching them.
Exactly.
And the thing is, I wouldn't want my child going to a Bible college where everybody's just stinking carnal and it's like this party life, and that's I wouldn't like that either. But at the same time, is it really supposed to be a concentration camp too? I mean, there's just, I guess that's a subject for another day. But the Bible college model is just, it has so many flaws, and there are major side effects that come with it. And because these Bible colleges are often, leaders in certain circles, and they have all the big conferences that everybody goes to, because of that, a lot of the junk that happens in these places gets associated with all the IFB.
Well, and that's one of the things you were talking about is that, the Bible college model destroys the independence of fundamental Baptists. Because how can you be independent yet expect the Bible college to uphold everything that you personally do? And what happens is people just get sent out from one Bible college and just copy and paste whatever their standards were to them. And then 20 years down the line, when they've gotten more liberal, then we've got a big fight on our hands because you held those same standards, and then you get mad at them. And it's just a big mess of just trying to worry about other churches all the time and other people. And to an extent, we should be, in terms of just, who we personally fellowship with. But if you're just constantly worried about what the other church is doing in terms of just how they are, and then you're debating on whether or not you should send your kids to this Bible college or that Bible college. Maybe you'd be better off just not sending them to any Bible college at all.
Right.
Yeah,
maybe they should get trained in their local church.
Yeah, that's a crazy thought. I mean, how many times are you just going to send your kids off to Bible college, they get messed up at Bible college, and then just go this trendy route, and we're just going to... How many times are you going to bury your head in the sand and act like there's no problem at all,
Yeah, and it's really sad, too, because in these Bible colleges, the focus is so much on the standards.
Yeah.
Don't do this, don't do that. And I've talked to many I have many preacher friends that are graduates of a lot of these, big name IFB colleges, and they will all tell you, all I was taught there was a methodology.
Mm-hmm.
I was taught, this is the kind of music you use. We use a King James Bible, we believe in a pre-trib rapture. We, don't do this, but they don't know any doctrine. They will be the first ones to tell you that. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to the big leadership there, they're not teaching anything. How many, and again, there's exceptions out there, but I'm speaking right now from the world that I came from. When it came to the big names, I can't find their teaching on doctrine. I can't find any examples of them just, expounding on the scriptures, teaching, getting into some actual real theology. A lot of them are known for just the theatrics and the face ripping. I mean, guys with just great big personalities. That's what they were kind of known for. But and the thing is too, I've sat down and talked to some of these people and tried talking to them about theology. And what's scary, they don't know very much.
Well, what draws a bigger crowd?
Theatrics. I mean, theatrics though. I heard it said this way one time too. Like with the camp meeting crowd too. You can get a lot of attention with a lot of that stuff, but you're not going to keep a crowd real long.
Well, and
with that, because people need the theology. That's what they keep coming back for.
The correct combination of the theatrics with the theology could be good.
Mm-hmm.
If you can draw people in and then point them in the right direction.
Right.
But if you just have nothing but a cartwheel, eventually people are going to get tired of watching you do a cartwheel and going to leave.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. And I know preachers that literally, that's all I remember about their sermon was the cartwheel.
Yeah.
I can't remember anything else.
Yeah.
I do remember one guy doing a cartwheel. The only other thing I remember in that message is something he said and did that was actually a little inappropriate that I would rather not repeat online. And I was just like, what in the world? It was pretty bad. It was pretty bad. But
was that the guy talking about Fox News? That one?
I don't think.
Or you're talking about some Fox News anchor.
Oh, no. That was a preaching clip thing. No, I saw this in person. I was there.
Oh, okay.
This was something I saw in person. I was there, and I was just like, and what he said was true. I just don't think he should have said it. It was just like, and I was just like, whoa. It kind of threw me for a loop. But yeah. So but back on the subject of liberty. Again, it's really weird the way people look at the law of the Lord that is perfect, and they look at it with such just disdain, with such hatred.
Yeah.
And people, and a lot of the people too that are the most critical, they have no ability to differentiate between ceremonial law, between civil law, moral law. They have absolutely no ability. They don't even try.
They hate it.
They do. They're embarrassed by
They
it.
just outright want to ignore it and forget that it's there. And if you question them on it, they will melt like a snail, trying to act like it's not in the Bible and to defend it.
They're so embarrassed by all the people that God told Israel to wipe out.
Right.
That they're embarrassed by Sodom and Gomorrah getting wiped out.
Yeah.
So much that they've tried to change the narrative or change the reason why. God, it was just because of the pride.
Well, it wasn't because they were homos.
Yeah, no, that had nothing to do with it.
They weren't feeding the poor, so
Yeah.
Democrat.
Right, and that, which is just it's unbelievable.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
How they twist that stuff, but they're embarrassed by it.
Yeah.
And the thing is, this is all good stuff. The law teaches us what holiness is,
exactly,
and it shows us too that we're not capable of it. And that we need a savior.
And this is where they go wrong, is they will pull that out. Like, oh, look, there's no way I could ever keep this. And then just default to grace. But then they just act like well, since I can't keep it, I'm just going to completely ignore it and only focus on the love and the grace.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like the reason that the love and the grace is so special is because the law is so difficult.
Right.
When you just talk about grace, and you never give the contrast of why we even need that grace in the first place, then the grace just seems like it's taken for granted, that you don't need it. But it's not taken for granted. It's an amazing, incredible thing that God would give us that grace in spite of how bad we've messed up in the law. And in spite of just how wicked we are even after we get saved. When we line ourselves up with the Bible and what the Bible actually says. But if you never look at that and you never pay attention to it, and especially if you talk about how it's bad or how we shouldn't look at it, you're going to have a really distorted view of grace. And a lot of these people have exactly that. An extremely distorted view of grace.
Yeah. And the thing is, that Old Testament law, this was not a creative, elaborate system that God just came up with of all these obstacles and things you've got to accomplish in order to be good enough to go to heaven. No, these were actually good laws. These were good things. And so if we want to go back and look, and it's like, you know what, man, based on Leviticus 20:13, I don't think God wants us being homos.
Yeah.
Man, I mean, that seems pretty bad, you know. Bestiality, this is bad stuff. You know, abomination, we probably shouldn't like this stuff either. You know, and then they'll go to about, Deuteronomy 22:5, and then they'll it also tells you how to handle a nest if you find it in there too. Yeah, okay. It doesn't say it's an abomination not to do that, but you know what God was doing there? He was teaching conservation.
Yeah.
He gave examples of conservation. Even a trendy should like that.
Well, that argument makes me so mad too, because it's basically just like the Bible's stupid.
Yeah.
The Bible's pointless. Look, it's talking about a bird's nest. How dumb is that?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay.
No,
so that's your opinion on the Bible then.
And let's look at that too, because after it explains what to do with the bird and the nest, it says, so thou mayest prolong thy days. God was trying to show them how to survive as a nation, and they didn't want to just be wasteful with the natural resources that were there. I mean, doesn't that, you know what that sounds a little bit like? Environmentalism. It's just God's involved in it instead of like the secular environmentalism of today.
Instead of paying taxes.
This is like biblical environmentalism, and these people like scoff at it.
Yeah.
And then it says too, when thou build us a new house, then thou shalt make a battlement for thy roof, that thou bring not blood upon thine house, if any man fall from thence. You know what it is? Safety codes. Mm-hmm. We have those today too, don't we? And you know what? All of these guys in their trendy little hipster churches, they followed all the safety codes there. Mm-hmm. They're following all those fire codes. You know what? That kind of stuff is biblical, because you don't want people coming in your church and getting hurt and having accidents. This is showing being accountable. This is all good stuff. So the thing is, they'll get all on board with the environmentalist stuff. They'll get all on board with the safety code stuff. Although they're the ones that want to do everything but verse 5. Mm-hmm. They're the ones that are hypocrites. They like all the other stuff, but again, it's just they're embarrassed by that law. They're embarrassed by Leviticus 20:13, and they need to get over it. And the thing is, when you follow those laws, when you don't lie with mankind as with womankind, when you are monogamous and just marry one woman, you know what? Your chance of getting AIDS are pretty slim. And what is it we're constantly hearing whenever they're talking about LGBT stuff? We got to look at the disparities in their community with all these diseases, and the solution's always more government money. Yeah. It's like, maybe it has something to do with the lifestyle. Maybe if they followed the laws of God, they wouldn't have to deal with the bondage of AIDS.
The government can take 50% of my paycheck if they deal with them correctly.
Well, for this cause, pay ye tribute.
Yeah,
for this cause,
serious.
Pay ye tribute.
Yeah.
For that minister that he doesn't bear the sword in vain, paying executions with their tax dollars, that's as biblical as it gets right there.
I agree that there's a lot of problems in the LGBTQ community, and that there's a lot of disease and there's a lot of despair, so we should probably take care of them.
Take care of them without the camp.
Yeah, absolutely. But on that blissful note, we're out of time, but we're going to end with our preaching clip of the week. This is where we're going to close it out. Keep sending these to us. This one was sent to us, but this is Dr. David Zempel, and it was I don't know if he's out of this church, but he preached this at Falls Baptist Church in Menominee, Wisconsin. Just a good message about preaching the gospel, and when you're out visiting, actually give the gospel. Don't just go out and just talk about the weather, talk about how hip and trendy your church is. Actually get to the gospel. Tell them how to be saved. Just some good practical stuff. I appreciated this clip. So we're going to close it right here with us. We appreciate everyone watching. And then we will end it with the preaching clip of the week, Dr. David Zempel. So go ahead and roll that clip.
The preacher featured on this clip is not necessarily endorsed by Pastor McMurtry or the Spirit of Liberty broadcast, nor does the preacher being featured necessarily endorse this broadcast or Pastor McMurtry. The makers of the Spirit of Liberty broadcast just heard this clip and thought,
"That's good preaching." I want to say something. I want to say it very specifically and very directly. I have people tell me on a regular basis, I had a chance to witness to so-and-so. Now you say, that's great. Now I ask, what did you say? I told them I was a Christian and invited them to church. That's great. It's a testimony, but it's not what God wants from us. I've told you before, but I'll remind you again, we've got to get to the gospel. We've got to get to the gospel. And there's only one way I can do it with my personality. If I talk about it being a nice day and what a cute dog and beautiful lawn, I never get back to it. I don't know how to steer it back, so I just say I'm Pastor Zempel from Martinsville Baptist Tabernacle and ask them, do you go to church? Doesn't matter what they answer. I just want to find out where they're at. Yeah, I used to go to such and such a church, whatever. And I know where they're coming from theologically. I know somewhat what their mindset is. Next question is pretty much always the same. Is anybody showing you how you can know for sure you're going to heaven? Less than 2 minutes, usually, sometimes less than 30 seconds. Engaged in the gospel. But we got to understand that the gospel is a message of hope to sinners. And I would go through the gospel and I tell them that all are sinners, and they would readily agree with me. And I tell them that Jesus died for their sin, and they would very often understand that. And I ask them, do you want to accept Jesus Christ as your Savior? And they say, I don't think so. It's like, what's wrong? I didn't give them the whole gospel. You're a sinner. And your sin has consequences. And we've got to learn how to say it, and it's different with every person, and the Spirit of God will direct you, but you've got to say, listen, that sin is going to take you to a Christless eternity. You're going to die and go to hell. And I typically take them to Revelation and show them that even a person that lies is going to experience the lake of fire, and you can see when the gospel has gripped their heart, their countenance changes, they're serious, and they want a solution. Now I tell them there's good news. Jesus took your place. He died for you. And by simply calling out to Him with a desire for Him to take away your sin, change your life, you can be saved. And it's amazing the percentage of people that'll get saved. Because like the Samaritan woman, we weren't afraid to tell them about their sin. All about it, the consequences.
That's good preaching.